Well, hello again, everybody. I'm Michael Ljung. I'm the Chief Software Engineer for Accenture, and I'm here with my friend, Mark Porter, who is the Chief Technology Officer for MongoDB. So, Mark, what are we talking about today?
So today, I thought we'd talk about the need for experimentation.
Experimentation.
Experimentation is so important because we're just not going to get it right the first time. And yet, it's really hard to have experimentation culture at a company. So tell me about what you guys have experienced.
So, I think a lot of our clients expect it to be right the first time. And what's so interesting is they expect it to be right the first time on these large new build projects that last 18 months to 2 years, right? And by the time we get to the finish line, maybe the business context or the circumstances or the requirements have changed. So I think when we think about experimentation, you want to fail fast, right? The saying in Silicon Valley. The key there is fast. Being able to fail fast means being able to figure out very quickly that things aren't going in the direction that you want and just simply readjusting. And so what do you run into when you talk with clients about experimentation and proper ways to experiment?
So it's funny. So we have this problem all the time because most MongoDB customers are either new companies who are starting building new applications.
Yep.
That's MongoDB's, kind of initial creation story. And then we have customers who are coming and they're transforming their apps, but they're learning new technology. So the reality is everyone who's using MongoDB is trying something new. And so one of the things we really like is the document model, which is in JSON, which is the international standard,
Yes.
which lets you have human readable, computer readable data. And XML came before, but let's be honest, XML may have been computer readable, but boy was it hard to be human readable. So JSON came along, and now we have something which is both human readable and computer readable.
More compact
and more
easier
compact
to process. Yeah.
and easier to process. So what we find is people will play around and they'll add fields and they'll try things and they'll do all this and then they'll go back and they'll version their schema that they'll want to. They'll play time and time again until they get it right. And so this experimentation is so important. But what I find is it's actually not about the technology. It's about the culture and the people. Do people feel safe experimenting? Because the reality is they often don't. Their managers are coming to them saying, "Are you done yet?" And so what I do with my teams internally at MongoDB is I tell them, what are you going to learn if this goes wrong? I want you to write that down. And that way they've raised up the fact that one, there's a possibility things might not go well, and two, they've made it very obvious that this is a learning experience.
I like how you require people to write it down because in that way, you're actually getting value out of the learning, right? A continuous learning organization is not always going to get things right. I think the key for me is that failing fast means having software that you build fast, that you build quickly and can quickly get to market and very quickly adjust. And so again, that's where modern engineering approaches with microservices, which we spent some time talking about, and the right size database, which we spent some time talking about. And then to your point, having the right sort of culture and organization and mindset around it. Why don't we shift to the organization and culture? So what do you think about when you think about the culture that is required to, or the organization that's required to support experimentation?
So it's really interesting. Number one, a lot of organizations have been around for a long time, and they have all these processes and all these procedures, and people are scared of breaking those processes and procedures. But if you're going to move to the cloud, that's step one, or you're going to transform yourself into a modern organization using modern software, you're going to have to break a lot of that stuff. And so the first thing we talk about is giving people psychological safety to propose new things. And that has to go all the way up the chain. Has to come all the way from C-levels like you and I, all the way through VPs and directors and down to leads. Because if you don't do it, these people are running around and they're afraid to experiment. So that's one thing. The second thing is, like we've talked about before, keeping the team small. And then something I've written about before is this concept of candor. Now, Reed Hastings talks about candor at Netflix all the time, and I'm totally bought into his way of thinking about it. Executives need to speak truths all the way down the organization. What is going well? What is going poorly? And the organization needs to speak truths back up. That release was not as good as we hoped it would be. We're not going to be done on time. And if everyone speaks with candor, that's step one. Step two is speaking with context. Give the developers the business context. Yeah, the developers are going to sit there with their noise-canceling headphones on unless you actually tell them why what they're doing is important to the business.
Yep.
And what I've found is today's developer, today's modern developer, actually wants to be involved with that. And next, you give them that psychological safety to experiment and to, when they fail, yeah, it's a failure, but we learn from it. And what I find is that what every manager, what you and I want, is accountability. I mean, if everyone has accountability, your and my job is much easier, right?
Yep.
Well, I find that if you give them candor, context, empowerment, and safety, they will step up and ask for accountability. And that's just how I try to run my orgs, and that's how I counsel my customers.
I want to build on the concept of empowerment, which is very important to product teams and agile ways of working. You know, we've worked with some clients that embrace agile, and I remember being in discussions with a client that was kicking off the agile journey and had a very rigorous process and lots of stakeholders that would have to sign off the documents and designs. And I remember we were trying to move things along because, you know, deadlines, and we had to say to the product owner, like, hey, here's the issue that we need to resolve because the sprint's almost over and we want to get this done as part of the sprint. Here are your 3 options. We think this one is the best, but you're the product owner. You decide. You've been empowered to make the decision for the organization. And that person's reaction was, okay, I'll take it to the next monthly steering committee meeting. But no. No, that's not agile. The great thing about agile is you have been empowered to make the decision for the steering committee. We can implement it quickly and at low cost, fast software, and we can demo and show them in the software what it looks like and why we think that's the right answer. And you know what? If the steering committee doesn't like it at the agile ceremony where we're doing the demo, we can change it, and it doesn't cost a lot of money to change. Back to your point about
right, because it's small amount in,
yeah,
and it's iterative benefit.
We're getting feedback in
right.
real time, and as a result, the software is going to be much higher quality. Yeah, maybe there's going to be a small bump along the way, but by experimenting and having those small bumps along the way, we can get a much better result at the end.